Growing up working class in the 1970s meant the lights stayed on, the food was hot, and the answer to almost everything was no. Your parents worked. They worked long hours, odd shifts, weekends, holidays, anything that kept the bills paid, and the house showed it. Not in what was there, but in what was missing. No second car, no central air, no name brand cereal on the shelf. Number 52 on this list kept the hot water bill down, and every kid in the house knew exactly who climbed into that tub first. Number 24 will take you back to what a single window fan and a 100-degree upstairs bedroom felt like in the middle of July. And number 1 is the one thing every person watching this already knows, even if nobody in your family ever said it out loud. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 100 signs you grew up working class in the 1970s. Number 100. The wall-mounted can opener bolted next to the stove. Every working-class kitchen in the 1970s had one. A metal bracket screwed into the wall or the underside of a cabinet with a crank handle and a cutting wheel that had been dulled by years of Campbell's soup cans, Green Giant green beans, and Carnation evaporated milk. Nobody owned an electric can opener. Nobody needed one. You grabbed the can, locked it into place, and turned the handle until the lid popped loose with a small metallic snap. The edge of that lid could slice a finger open faster than a razor blade, and every kid in the house learned that lesson exactly once. The opener itself never got replaced unless it physically broke. The crank handle was sticky from years of splattered grease. The wall behind it had a shadow of rust from the mounting bracket. But it opened everything, and in a kitchen that ran on canned goods, that small piece of hardware was used more often than the toaster. Number 99. One car for the whole family. The car sat in the driveway like a shared resource, because that is exactly what it was. Dad drove it to work. Mom had it during the day only if Dad got a ride with someone from the plant. On weekends, every errand, every trip to the grocery store, every visit to a relative across town happened in that single vehicle. If something went wrong with it, the whole household stopped moving. A dead battery was not an inconvenience. It was a full-blown crisis that required a neighbor with jumper cables and a prayer. Most working-class families in the 1970s did not even consider a second car. That was for people in the suburbs with 2-car garages and driveways that curved. Your family had one car, one set of keys, and a system for who got to use it that everyone understood without being told. Number 98. Eating supper at the kitchen counter because there were not enough chairs. In plenty of working-class homes, the kitchen table seated 4, and the family had 5 or 6. Somebody ate standing up at the counter, or sitting on an overturned bucket, or perched on the step stool your mother used to reach the top shelf. Nobody bought extra chairs. The table was already pushed against the wall to save space, and adding another seat meant someone's elbow was in the stove. The youngest kids ate wherever they fit. It was not considered a problem. It was just Tuesday. Number 97. Dad worked double shifts. The concept of overtime was not a bonus in a working-class household. It was the plan. When the plant offered extra hours, your father took them. When the weekend shift opened up, he signed his name on the list before anyone else could. You knew he was working a double because he left before you woke up and came home after you were already asleep. Some weeks you barely saw him at all, just the evidence of him. A jacket on the hook, dishes in the sink, the truck parked crooked because he was too tired to straighten it out. He did it because the mortgage was due, the roof needed patching, and school shoes did not buy themselves. The extra hours showed up on his check, and that check went straight to the kitchen table, where your mother divided it into the same envelope she filled every payday. Number 96. Clipping coupons from the Sunday paper. Every Sunday morning, before anyone touched the comics, your mother sat down at the kitchen table with a pair of scissors and the newspaper spread out in front of her. She cut out every coupon that matched something the family actually used. 15 cents off a box of detergent, 10 cents off a can of vegetables, a quarter off a bag of flour, Those little paper rectangles went into an envelope in her purse, organized by aisle, and at the grocery store she handed them to the cashier one at a time. The total dropped by a few dollars, and in a household where every dollar was already spoken for, that meant something. She never left a coupon on the table if it matched something on the list. Nobody called it extreme couponing. Nobody made a hobby out of it. It was just how your mother shopped, because the alternative was paying full price for things the family could not afford at full price. Number 95. Store brand everything. The yellow label. The plain white box with black lettering that just said cornflakes or peanut butter or grape jelly. In a working-class kitchen in the 1970s, name brands were a luxury reserved for other people's pantries. You did not get Jif. You got whatever was cheapest on the shelf, and it came in packaging that looked like it had been designed by an accountant who did not believe in color. The cereal tasted close enough. The crackers were a little drier. The ketchup was thinner and came out of the bottle too fast. But it all ended up on the same plate, and nobody at the table said a word about it because there was nothing to compare it to. You had never tasted the real thing. The store brand was the real thing as far as you knew, and it worked fine. Number 94. Washing and reusing sandwich bags. The box of sandwich bags in a working-class kitchen was not disposable. After lunch, the bags came home in the lunchbox, got rinsed under the faucet, and hung over the dish rack to dry. One box lasted months. Your mother treated them like they were made of something expensive, because in a house where every nickel was tracked, even a few cents of wasted plastic felt like carelessness. If a bag got a hole, she folded the sandwich differently so the hole faced up. The bags were not thrown away until they were falling apart. Number 93. The screen door that never shut right. Every working-class house had one. The spring was too loose or too tight or missing altogether. The frame was bent from years of kids slamming through it at full speed on their way to the backyard. It smacked against the frame when someone let it go, and the sound could be heard from 3 rooms away. Your mother yelled about it at least once a day, but fixing it properly meant buying a new door, and a new screen door was nowhere on the list of things the household budget could absorb, so it stayed. The screen had a patch of duct tape where someone's elbow went through it. The latch only caught if you lifted the handle and pushed at the same time, while leaning into it with your shoulder. Everybody in the family knew the technique. Guests did not, and the door slammed behind them every time. Number 92. Clothes on the line. The dryer was either broken, too expensive to run, or did not exist in the house at all, so your mother hung everything on the clothesline in the backyard. Sheets, towels, shirts, jeans, underwear, all of it stretched out in the open where the neighbors could see exactly what the family owned. In the summer, the clothes dried stiff in the sun and smelled like cut grass and hot cotton. In the winter, they froze solid on the line and came inside like cardboard, rigid enough to stand on their own. There was a wooden basket of clothespins on the back porch that had been there since before you were born, and pulling in the laundry before a rainstorm was a job that fell to whoever was closest to the back door when your mother shouted. The clothesline was not a lifestyle choice. It was a budget decision that played out in the backyard 5 days a week. Number 91. One telephone on the wall in the kitchen. It was harvest gold or avocado green, bolted to the wall next to the refrigerator, and the coiled cord was long enough to stretch around the corner into the hallway if you needed a private conversation, which you almost never got. Everyone in the house could hear every word. Long-distance calls were timed because they cost real money per minute. If the phone rang after 9 at night, something was wrong. The phone was not a toy. It was not entertainment, and if you tied up the line too long, your father told you to hang up because he was expecting a call from the plant about the morning shift. One phone, one line, one rule. Keep it short. And if someone was already on it when you needed to make a call, you waited. There was no other option. Number 90. The heating vent everyone fought over on winter mornings. In a working-class house with a single furnace and no insulation to speak of, Heat traveled through the floor vents in uneven waves. One vent in the hallway or the kitchen blew warm air harder than the rest, and on a winter morning before school, that vent belonged to whoever got there first. Kids stood on it in bare feet, pajama legs ballooning out from the rising heat, arms crossed, eyes half closed. You stayed there until your mother yelled at you to get dressed or your brother shoved you off it to take his turn. The rest of the house was cold enough that you could see your breath in the bathroom if you got up early enough. The bedrooms upstairs had vents that barely whispered. The living room vent rattled when the furnace kicked on. But that one good vent near the kitchen was the warmest spot in the house, and on a morning when the temperature outside was in the single digits, it was worth every argument. Number 89. Dad fixed everything himself. The plumber was too expensive. The electrician was too expensive. The mechanic charged by the hour and your father earned less than that, so he fixed it all himself. The kitchen faucet that dripped at 3 in the morning. The toilet that would not stop running. The car that turned over 6 times before it caught. The fence post that rotted through every other year. He owned a toolbox and a shelf of miscellaneous parts salvaged from other repairs, and he figured things out by looking at them, taking them apart, and putting them back together. Sometimes the fix lasted a month before it broke again. Sometimes it held for years. But calling a professional was not an option when the money for the repair was the same money earmarked for the grocery bill. He learned by doing, and you learned by watching. Number 88. Boots 2 sizes too big stuffed with newspaper. Working-class parents bought winter boots with growing room. 2 sizes too big meant 2 winters of use instead of 1. To keep your feet from sliding around inside, your mother stuffed the toes with balled-up newspaper. It crinkled when you walked. The paper went soggy by the end of a day in the snow, and your socks still got damp, but the boots fit well enough to get you to school and back. By the second winter, your feet had caught up and the newspaper was gone, but by then the soles were worn smooth, and you slid on every patch of ice between the house and the bus stop. Number 87. Left overnight. One night a week, usually Thursday or Friday, the kitchen did not produce a new meal. Everything from the previous 3 or 4 days came out of the refrigerator in its original container and went on the table at the same time. Tuesday's meatloaf sat next to Wednesday's rice and whatever soup was left from Monday. You picked through it like a cafeteria line with no sneeze guard. Some of it had dried out around the edges. Some of it looked noticeably different than it had the first time around. But throwing food away in a working-class household was close to a moral failing, and left overnight was the practical solution that kept the trash can empty and the family fed. You ate what was there, heated or cold, and if none of it appealed to you, there was bread and butter. That was the backup plan for everything. Number 86. Long-distance phone calls were timed with the kitchen timer. The telephone was on the wall. The cord stretched into the hallway for privacy, and if the call was long distance, your mother stood nearby with the egg timer running. Long-distance charges showed up on the phone bill line by line, and every extra minute cost money the household did not have to spare. Conversations with relatives in other states were kept short, efficient, and to the point. You said what you needed to say, you asked how everyone was doing, and you hung up before the timer went off. Birthday calls lasted 3 minutes. Holiday calls lasted 5. Anything longer earned a lecture about the phone bill that lasted longer than the call itself. When someone passed away, that was the one exception. Those calls went as long as they needed to, and nobody mentioned the cost until the bill arrived. Number 85. The sound of Dad coming home from the plant. You heard it before you saw him. The truck door slamming in the driveway, the heavy boots on the front steps, the screen door with its broken spring crashing shut behind him. Then the smell. Grease, metal shavings, sawdust, diesel, sweat, whatever that day's shift required, it walked through the door with him and settled into the hallway like a second presence. Your father did not work in an office. He worked in a place with machinery, concrete floors, fluorescent lights, and a time clock bolted to the wall by the entrance. A stamping plant in Ohio, a lumber mill in Oregon, a meatpacking facility on the edge of town in Nebraska, a tire factory outside Akron. The work was loud, repetitive, physical, and it wore the body down one shift at a time. His hands were calloused in places that never softened. His knuckles had scars from incidents he never fully explained. He had a spot at the kitchen table where he sat and ate whatever your mother had set aside for him, because dinner was at 5:30 and he never got home before 6:15. Nobody talked much during that meal. He ate, he watched the evening news with the volume turned up, and he went to bed early because the alarm was set for 4:30 the next morning. Your mother washed his work clothes in a separate load because the smell did not come out in a single cycle, and his shirts had permanent stains in the armpits that no amount of bleach could touch. And that was the rhythm of a working-class house. You did not see your father relax until Saturday afternoon, and even then he was usually under the car or on the roof patching something that had been leaking since April. The plant was not just where he went. It was the thing the whole family orbited around. Shift times determined when you ate, when you could make noise, and when the house had to be silent. If the plant announced layoffs, the whole neighborhood felt the tension. Families that had been stable for years were suddenly uncertain, and if your father's name was not on the list, the relief in the house was physical. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone breathed a little easier for the rest of the week. Number 84. Kool-Aid instead of real juice. The packet cost a few cents and your mother mixed it with tap water and enough sugar to make it sweet in a plastic pitcher that stained permanently after the first batch. Cherry, grape, orange, tropical punch. Real orange juice from a carton was expensive. Apple juice was expensive. Anything that came from actual fruit was expensive. Kool-Aid was what working-class kids drank between meals, at every cookout, at every friend's house on the block. The red mustache it left on your upper lip was a neighborhood uniform from June through September. It was summer in a glass, and that was the end of the conversation. Nobody compared it to fresh squeezed anything, because fresh squeezed anything was not part of the vocabulary. Kool-Aid was cold, it was sweet, it came in flavors that did not exist in nature, and the pitcher was always full because the refill cost almost nothing. Number 83. The same bedspread for 10 straight years. In a working-class bedroom, the bedspread did not match the curtains. The bedspread did not match anything. It was whatever came with the house, or whatever your grandmother gave your mother when she got married, or whatever showed up at the church rummage sale for a quarter. It was washed, faded, and pilled, and it stayed on that bed until it physically could not cover the mattress anymore. Nobody redecorated a bedroom. Nobody bought new bedding because the old set looked tired. If the bedspread still covered the bedspread stayed. Number 82. Sharing a bedroom with your siblings. 2 kids to a room was standard in a working-class house. 3 was not unusual if the house was small enough and the family was large enough. Bunk beds, a trundle pulled out from under the main bed at night, or 2 mattresses pushed together on the floor and separated by a strip of masking tape that nobody respected. Your space was half a dresser drawer, and whatever corner of the closet was left after your brother's winter coat took up the rest. Privacy did not exist in that room. Your sister's radio kept you awake. Your brother's alarm went off before yours and woke everyone up. Every argument happened at arm's length because there was nowhere to go and no door to close. A bedroom of your own was something you saw on television, in houses that had a staircase and a second floor. Your house had 2 bedrooms and 4 kids, and the math was not in your favor. Number 81. The medicine cabinet had 3 things in it: aspirin, a bottle of mercurochrome, and a tin of Band-Aids. That was the entire medical infrastructure of a working-class household. A headache got aspirin. A scrape got the red stinging burn of mercurochrome dabbed on with the glass applicator built into the cap. A cut got a Band-Aid. Anything beyond that was either ignored or solved with rest. The idea of going to the doctor for a cold or a bruise or a sore throat was foreign. Doctors cost money, and money was for rent and groceries. You got better, or you waited until you got better. Number 80. Garage sales and yard sales for school clothes and toys. Saturday mornings in the summer, your mother loaded the kids in the car and drove slowly through the neighborhood looking for hand-painted signs on telephone poles. She had cash in an envelope and a mental list of everything the family needed before September. Winter coats, jeans, shoes if the size was right, board games, roller skates, a bike that needed a new chain but was otherwise solid. The prices were written on masking tape stuck to each item. A quarter for a shirt, 50 cents for a pair of corduroy pants, $1 for a set of Hot Wheels tracks missing one piece. You learned early that new was not the default. Used was the default. New was what happened at Christmas, if it happened at all. Your mother could outfit 3 kids for the school year on what some families spent on a single pair of sneakers. Number 79. Dad's toolbox. It was metal, heavy, olive green or red, and it lived in the garage on a shelf next to a coffee can full of loose screws. Inside was everything your father needed to keep the house and the vehicles running without calling anyone for help. A set of combination wrenches he had owned since before you were born. Screwdrivers with cracked handles wrapped in electrical tape. A claw hammer with a chip in the head from hitting something it should not have hit. Pliers that had been used for pulling nails, bending wire, clamping a radiator hose on the shoulder of the highway, and opening a stuck jar lid when nothing else worked. That toolbox was not organized. It was packed tight, and it smelled like motor oil and rust. Nobody touched it without asking, because every tool inside it had been earned over years, not given in a set. Number 78. Sleeping on the floor or the couch when company came. When relatives visited a working-class home, the guest bedroom did not exist. Nobody had a spare room. The visitors got your bed, and you got the couch, a sleeping bag on the living room floor, or a spot next to your sibling in a bed that was already too small for one. During holidays, every flat surface in the house became a sleeping area. Couch cushions lined up on the carpet, blankets thrown over a recliner. You slept wherever you landed, and you did not complain about it because your parents had spent the day cooking food they could barely afford for people they loved. Number 77. Homemade birthday cakes. A bakery cake was out of the question. Those started at several dollars and went up from there, and that was before the writing on top. So your mother made it from a box of Duncan Hines or Betty Crocker mix, frosted it with a can of store-brand icing, and stuck however many candles were left over from last year into the top. The layers were uneven because the pans were warped. The frosting was thick on one side and thin on the other. The lettering in colored icing was crooked and slightly misspelled because she did it freehand with a butter knife. But it was a birthday cake, and it showed up on the kitchen table with the lights off and the whole family singing off-key. And for a working-class kid, the whole kitchen smelled like a party. Nobody expected fondant or decorations. They expected yellow cake with chocolate frosting, and that is exactly what they got. Number 76. One bathroom for the whole family. 5 people, 6 people, sometimes more. And one bathroom with one toilet, one sink, and a bathtub with a shower curtain that never stayed on the rod no matter how many times your father bent the rings back into shape. Morning routine was a timed operation run with military precision. Dad went first because he left the earliest. Then the kids, oldest to youngest, in shifts measured by minutes, not comfort. You learned to be fast. You learned to knock. You learned that privacy was a concept you saw on television, not something that existed in a house with one bathroom and 4 people who all needed it at the same time. If the hot water ran out before your turn, you took a cold shower and did not mention it because there was a line forming behind you and complaining would not make the water heater work any faster. Number 75. Dinner at the same time every night. In a working-class house, dinner was not flexible. It was not a suggestion. It happened at 5:30 or 6 o'clock sharp, depending on when Dad's shift ended, and every person in the house was expected at the table with clean hands and no excuses. You ate what was served, and if you did not like it, you sat there until everyone else finished. The meal was built around whatever was cheap, filling, and could be stretched. Potatoes, rice, ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, canned green beans heated on the stove. There was no appetizer. There was no dessert unless it was jello or pudding made from a box mix. The dishes were washed by hand because there was no dishwasher. The table was wiped down and the kitchen was closed for the night. That was dinner, every night. Same time, same rules, same chair. Number 74. Board games and card games instead of going out. Entertainment outside the house cost money, and working-class families in the 1970s did not spend money on entertainment unless it was a birthday or a holiday. So the living room floor became the arena. Monopoly games that lasted 4 hours and ended in an argument. Sorry, with 2 missing pawns. The game of life with a cracked spinner. A deck of bicycle playing cards and a game of rummy that got louder with every round until somebody accused somebody else of cheating. Nobody drove to a movie theater on a Friday night. Nobody went bowling unless the whole family was invited to someone else's party. Friday evening was cards at the kitchen table with the AM radio playing in the background, and Saturday night was a board game on the living room carpet while the television played whatever was on. The game boxes were held together with rubber bands because the lids had split at the corners years ago. Number 73. Extension cords running between rooms like permanent wiring. A working-class house built in the 1940s or 1950s had 2 outlets per room if you were lucky. By the 1970s, the television, the lamp, the radio, the clock, and the iron all needed plugging in, and there was nowhere to put them. Extension cords ran along baseboards, under rugs, and through doorways. Some of them had been there so long the plastic casing had turned yellow. Your father knew it was not up to code. Your mother knew the cord under the hallway rug was a tripping hazard. But calling an electrician to add outlets was not in the budget, so the cords stayed, and everybody stepped over them without thinking. Number 72. The neighborhood. Working-class neighborhoods in the 1970s were not subdivisions with homeowner associations and community pools. They were blocks, short blocks with narrow lots, chain-link fences, cracked sidewalks, and driveways that were 2 strips of poured concrete with crabgrass growing down the middle. The houses were small. Cape Cods, ranches, bungalows built in the years right after the war for returning servicemen who needed a place to raise a family on a factory wage. By the 1970s, those houses were pushing 30 years old and every one of them showed it. The roofing was patched with mismatched shingles. The aluminum siding was faded and dented where someone had backed into it. The garages were too narrow for the cars people were driving by then. But the neighborhood worked because everyone on the street was in the same financial situation. The man next door drove a forklift at the warehouse. The woman across the street rang up groceries at the A&P. The family on the corner had 5 kids and a dog and a fence that leaned 15 degrees to the left. You knew everyone within a 3-block radius. You knew what car they drove, what shift they worked, what time they left in the morning, and how many kids lived in the house. The street itself was the community, because nobody had the money or the reason to go anywhere else. Your world was 6 blocks long, and everything important was inside it. The elementary school, the church your family attended, the corner store, the park with the rusted swing set, and the houses of every kid you had ever called a friend. Some families never left that neighborhood. They grew up on the block, married someone from 2 streets over, moved into a house around the corner when one came up for sale, and raised their own kids in the same zip code. The neighborhood was not something you chose from a brochure. It was where you landed, and for most working-class families, it was the only place they would ever live. Number 71. Dad's work boots by the front door. They were heavy, steel-toed, caked with whatever he had walked through that day. Mud from a construction site, grease from the shop floor, sawdust from the mill, concrete dust from the loading dock. They sat by the front door or on a piece of yesterday's newspaper by the back step, and nobody moved them or complained about the mess they left behind. Those boots were the most expensive piece of clothing your father owned, and they lasted until the soles wore through to the steel shank. Then he took them to the shoe repair to get resoled because a new pair cost more than the family spent on groceries in a week. The laces had been replaced more than once with whatever was available. The leather was cracked and permanently darkened from years of oil and water. They smelled like labor, and that smell never fully left the hallway. Number 70. Bread bags inside your snow boots. When your winter boots developed a crack in the sole, or when you did not own proper boots and wore your regular shoes in the snow instead, your mother pulled a plastic bread bag out of the drawer and wrapped it around each foot before you put the shoe on. Wonder Bread, Sunbeam, whatever brand happened to be in the kitchen that morning. The plastic kept the water out for about 20 minutes, which was long enough to walk to school without soaking through. By the time you arrived, your feet were sweating inside the plastic, but they were dry. Nobody talked about it on the bus. Half the kids in the back rows had bread bags crinkling in their boots, and the other half were wearing boots 2 sizes too big because they had been bought to last at least 2 winters. Number 69. One television for the whole house. It sat in the living room on a wooden stand or inside a heavy console that doubled as a piece of furniture, and whatever was on that screen was what the entire family watched together. There was no retreating to your own bedroom to watch something different because your bedroom did not have a television in it. Nobody's bedroom had a television in it. Whoever controlled the channel dial controlled the evening. Dad watched the news at 6. Mom got her programs after the dishes were done. The kids had Saturday morning cartoons and whatever came on after school between 3 and 5. Arguments about what to watch were settled by seniority, and seniority meant age. Dad won. After him, Mom. After her, the oldest kid. If you were the youngest child in the house, you watched whatever everyone else wanted, every single night, and you learned to enjoy it. Number 68. Patches and iron-ons on your jeans. A hole in the knee did not mean the end of a pair of jeans. It meant the beginning of a repair. Your mother cut a square of denim from an older pair that had already been retired, pinned it to the inside of the knee, and sewed it down with thread that almost matched the color of the original fabric. If hand sewing took too long, there were iron-on patches sold at the fabric counter for a few cents apiece. They came in, squares and circles and little shapes, and they peeled off after 3 trips through the washing machine, at which point your mother sewed them down anyway. By the time a pair of jeans was finally declared beyond saving, it had more patch material than original denim. That was not a fashion statement. That was standard operating procedure in a house where new jeans cost more than they should and every pair needed to last a full year. 67. The bathroom in a working-class house did not have a bottle of liquid soap, a separate face wash, and a tube of exfoliating scrub. It had a bar of soap. 1 bar, usually ivory or dial, sitting in a dish on the edge of the sink or the rim of the bathtub, always slightly cracked on one side and always wearing a thin groove where people gripped it. Everybody used it. Dad used it after the plant. Mom used it after the kitchen. The kids used it whenever someone reminded them to wash their hands. If somebody dropped it and it cracked in half, you now had 2 bars, and the smaller piece went to the kitchen sink. It wore down to a thin wafer, and when it got too small to hold, your mother pressed it onto the new bar so nothing got wasted. A single bar lasted weeks, and the idea that soap was something you chose based on scent or skin type would not arrive in that house for another 20 years. Number 66. No real vacations. Working-class families in the 1970s did not fly anywhere. Airfare was expensive, hotels were expensive, and taking a week off from the plant meant losing a week's worth of pay that the household could not absorb. If your family went anywhere at all, it was a day trip, a state park with a picnic shelter an hour and a half down the highway. A lake 2 counties over where you swam off a rocky shore and ate sandwiches your mother packed in a cooler. A relative's house in the next town where you slept on the living room floor and called it an adventure. The word vacation meant something entirely different in a working-class house. It meant Dad had a week off in August, and he spent 4 of those days painting the garage and 1 of them fixing the back steps. Some families saved all year for a single weekend at a campground with an outhouse and a fire ring, and that weekend was the highlight of the entire summer. Number 65. The transistor radio on the kitchen windowsill. It ran on batteries or a frayed cord plugged into the one outlet behind the toaster. It played all day. Your mother listened to it while she cooked, while she cleaned, while she folded laundry at the kitchen table. The stations were AM, the signal drifted, and the speaker crackled when a truck drove past the house. But it was her connection to the outside world during the hours between breakfast and supper, and nobody touched the dial once she had it set to her station. That small plastic radio sat on that windowsill for years, and it never moved an inch. Number 64. Stretching ground beef with breadcrumbs. A pound of hamburger meat could feed 2 people if you served it straight. Your mother made it feed 6. She mixed it with a handful of breadcrumbs, a beaten egg, diced onion, and whatever else made the portion grow without changing the taste too much. The meatloaf was more loaf than meat. The patties for hamburger night had a softness to them that a pure beef burger never had. The spaghetti sauce contained just enough ground beef to color it brown, and the rest was tomato paste, water, and seasoning from a jar. Nobody at the table complained because the plate was full and the food was warm. Stretching a pound of meat across an entire meal for a family of 6 was not a shortcut. It was a skill, and your mother had been practicing it since the week she got married. Number 63. The neighbors watched your kids. Babysitters cost money that most working-class families did not have sitting around. Professional daycare cost even more, and barely existed in most neighborhoods in the 1970s. So the system that handled childcare was the one that had worked for generations. The woman next door or 2 houses down. Your mother went to her shift at the diner, and the neighbor kept an eye on you and her own kids at the same time. No contract, no hourly rate. Maybe a casserole dropped off on Friday, or watching her children the following Saturday so she could run errands alone. The entire block ran on that kind of quiet exchange. If you misbehaved 3 houses away, the adult who witnessed it corrected you on the spot and then called your mother before you even got home. You were never truly unsupervised, you just never had a designated babysitter. Number 62. Used bikes. A brand new bicycle from the Sears catalog or the Western Auto Store was a significant purchase in a working-class household. Most kids did not get one. What you got instead was a bike that someone else's kid had already ridden hard for 3 or 4 years. The paint was chipped down to bare metal in places. The chain slipped if you pedaled too fast. The seat was split down the middle and patched with a strip of black electrical tape that stuck to the back of your legs in the summer. Your father spent a Saturday morning tightening the handlebars, oiling the chain, replacing the brake pads, and pumping the tires with a hand pump from the garage. That was your bike now. You rode it every day, everywhere, until your legs outgrew the frame, and then it went to someone else's kid down the street. The cycle continued without anyone keeping track. Number 61. Sunday clothes were your only nice outfit. The clothing system in a working-class household had 3 tiers: play clothes, school clothes, and Sunday clothes. The Sunday outfit was the newest and cleanest thing you owned, and it came out once a week for church. A pressed button-down shirt, hard-soled shoes that pinched your toes, pants with a crease your mother ironed in that morning. You wore it for 2 hours and changed out of it the second you walked through the door at home, because getting a stain on your Sunday clothes was a punishable offense. That one outfit also doubled as what you wore to weddings, funerals, school picture day, and any other event that required the family to look like it had itself together. You did not have multiple options. You had one, and it served every formal occasion from September through June. Number 60. Casseroles, weak. A casserole was the perfect working-class dinner. It used one dish, it stretched cheap ingredients across 6 servings, and it sat in the oven at 350 for an hour while your mother folded laundry or helped with homework. Tuna noodle casserole with crushed potato chips on top, hamburger and rice baked with a can of cream of mushroom soup. Green bean casserole that came straight from the recipe on the back of the soup label. The ingredients came from cans and boxes because fresh produce was expensive and spoiled before the week was over. The casserole hit the table still bubbling in the same dish it was baked in, and everybody scooped from it with a serving spoon. There were no individual plated portions. You took what was offered, and if the pan was scraped clean before you got seconds, dinner was over. Number 59. The school bus ride. In a working-class neighborhood, the school bus was not a quick 10-minute shuttle. The route wound through blocks of small houses, picking up kids at nearly every corner, doubling back through cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets, and the full ride could easily last 45 minutes each way. You were one of the first ones picked up and one of the last ones dropped off, because the bus started in your part of town and worked its way outward toward the newer developments where the houses had attached garages and the stops were a quarter-mile apart. The bus itself was a rolling study in wear. It was loud, hot, and airless in September, freezing in January, and the green vinyl seats were cracked and mended with strips of duct tape that peeled off and stuck to the back of your legs. The windows slid down on metal tracks but did not always go back up, which meant snow blew in through the gap on the left side of row 6 all winter. The driver knew every kid by name and ran a tight system. Younger children sat up front, older kids claimed the back rows, and troublemakers were assigned the seat directly behind the driver where he could watch them in the mirror. That bus was where alliances formed and dissolved on a weekly basis, where fights broke out over nothing, and stories traveled from one end of the district to the other before the ride was over. You learned things on the school bus that had nothing to do with any classroom. Older kids talked about subjects you did not understand yet, and you filed the information away until you did. The ride home was always louder than the ride in, because the school day was over and nobody had any energy left to sit still. By the time the bus reached your corner and the door folded open, half the kids in the back were asleep with their heads against the window, and the other half were yelling about something that would be forgotten by Monday. You stepped off, walked to the house, and the screen door banged shut behind you. Number 58. Making your own entertainment from whatever was available. There was no money for toys that cost more than a couple of dollars, and the toy aisle at the store was a place you walked through on the way to something your mother actually needed. So you made your own fun from whatever was lying around. A stick became a sword. A cardboard refrigerator box from the appliance store at the end of the block became a spaceship for an entire weekend. An old tire hanging from a rope tied to a branch became the best ride in the neighborhood. Mud was a building material. Rocks were ammunition. A creek was an all-day destination. Working-class kids in the 1970s did not need a store-bought playset to fill an afternoon. You needed a backyard, a couple of friends, and enough imagination to turn an empty lot into a battlefield. And when the homemade contraption fell apart, which it always did, you started over the next morning. Number 57. Refilling the glass milk bottles for the porch. In plenty of working-class neighborhoods through the early 1970s, the milkman still came. He left glass bottles in a metal box on the front step, and your mother rinsed the empties and set them back out the night before delivery. The milk was whole, it was cold, and the cream floated to the top if you did not shake it. When home delivery finally stopped in your area, it felt like something small and reliable had disappeared from the routine. Your mother switched to gallon jugs from the grocery store, and the metal box on the porch sat empty for years before your father finally took it down. Number 56. Wax paper instead of plastic wrap. Plastic wrap cost more per roll, and it never tore straight off the box anyway. Your mother used wax paper for almost everything, wrapping sandwiches for lunch bags, covering bowls in the refrigerator, lining baking sheets, separating layers of cookies in a tin. It was cheap, it did the job, and the roll lasted a long time because she tore off only what she needed and not an inch more. If a piece of wax paper was clean enough and large enough after its first use, it got folded neatly and returned to the drawer for another round. In a working-class kitchen, nothing that could be reused was thrown away after a single use. That applied to foil, to bread bags, to butter containers that became leftover containers, and especially to wax paper. Number 55. Silence during the evening news. When the 6 o'clock news came on, the house went quiet. Dad sat in his chair, the one nobody else was allowed to use. The volume went up on the television, and every kid in the house understood that the next 30 minutes were not for talking, not for playing, and absolutely not for asking questions about what was for dessert. Walter Cronkite or John Chancellor or whoever the local anchor happened to be had the floor, and you did not interrupt that broadcast for anything short of a fire. If you needed to walk through the living room, you walked quietly. If you needed something from the kitchen, you waited until a commercial. The evening news was the 1/2 hour of the day when a working-class father sat perfectly still in his own home and nobody in the family dared disturb it. Number 54. The ironing board that never got put away. It stood in the corner of the kitchen or wedged into the end of the hallway, permanently set up because somebody in the house was always ironing something. Dad's work shirts for Monday, your school blouse for picture day, the good tablecloth that only came out when company was expected. Your mother stood at that board with a heavy steel iron that hissed steam and left faint scorch marks on the cover if she paused too long in one spot. The board had a tubular metal frame with legs that wobbled on the linoleum, and the cotton padding underneath had been compressed flat from years of daily use. Folding the board up and putting it in the closet made no practical sense when it was guaranteed to come back out again by tomorrow morning. So it stayed where it was, permanently open, like another piece of furniture. Number 53. Buying encyclopedias one volume at a time at the grocery store. The promotional sign hung above the checkout lane in block letters. This week, volume G through H, $1.99 with any purchase of $10 or more. Working-class families who wanted their kids to have a reference library at home built their encyclopedia sets over months, one volume at a time, timed to the weekly grocery run. The shelf in the living room had gaps. You owned A through D, then F, then skipped straight to M, because somebody missed a couple of weeks when money was tight or the car was in the shop. The set was never complete, but having any encyclopedias in the house at all felt like having access to a library without leaving the block. Your mother wanted her children to have something to look things up in, and this weekly installment plan was the only way she could manage the cost. Number 52. Sharing bathwater. Saturday night was bath night in a lot of working-class homes, and the tub was filled once. The youngest child went first because the water was cleanest and warmest. Then the next kid climbed in, then the next. By the time the oldest got their turn, the water was lukewarm at best and had taken on a grayish tint that nobody wanted to examine too closely. Some families added a kettle of hot water between rounds to keep the temperature bearable. Others did not bother. Either way, draining the whole tub and starting fresh for each child was not something that happened, because heating that much water cost money on the gas bill, and the gas bill was already high enough. You got in, you washed fast, you got out, and you did not linger. The bathtub was a shared household resource, same as the car, the telephone, and everything else under that roof. Number 51. Mom's winter coat was older than you were. She bought it years before the youngest child was born, and she had every intention of wearing it until the zipper gave out and the lining separated completely from the shell, whichever came first. It was long, dark, practical, and buttoned all the way up to the collar. The pockets had small holes in them that she never mended because she only used them for balled-up tissues and a spare house key. When you asked her once why she did not buy herself a new one, She looked at you like you had just suggested setting a stack of bills on fire in the kitchen sink. A new winter coat for herself was not on the priority list. New coats for the children were on the priority list. Her coat worked fine, it kept the wind out, and she never said a word about wanting a new one. Number 50. Collecting pop bottles for the deposit. A glass soda bottle was worth 2 cents at some stores, 5 cents at others, and working-class kids treated every empty one like a coin lying on the ground waiting to be picked up. You walked the ditches along the county road. You checked behind the bleachers at the ball field after a weekend game. You looked under the railroad bridge where teenagers gathered on Friday nights. A grocery bag full of bottles was enough to buy a candy bar and a pack of baseball cards, or a cold bottle of pop from the machine at the gas station if you wanted to trade glass for glass. It was the first money most working-class kids ever earned on their own, and the work was honest and simple. Find the bottle, carry it to the store, hand it over, collect the deposit, walk home, and do it again tomorrow. A grocery bag full of bottles carried by a 10-year-old traded for coins at the counter. That was how it worked, and that was good enough. Number 49. Frozen orange juice concentrate. The small cardboard cylinder sat in the back of the freezer between a bag of peas and a stack of aluminum-wrapped leftovers. And every morning your mother popped the metal lid, slid the frozen orange cylinder into a plastic pitcher, added 3 cans of cold water, and stirred it with a wooden spoon until the chunks broke apart and dissolved into something that passed for juice. Fresh squeezed was not an option. Carton juice from the dairy section cost 3 times as much per serving. The concentrate was tangy, slightly metallic, and never quite the same bright color as what came out of an actual orange. But it was vitamin C, and it was cold, and it showed up at the breakfast table in a glass next to a plate of buttered toast. That was how every morning started in a working-class kitchen, and nobody thought twice about it, because thinking twice meant you had too much time on your hands. Number 48. Meatloaf night. Every working-class kitchen in the 1970s had a meatloaf recipe, and it showed up on the dinner table the same night every week without variation. A pound of ground beef, an egg, a fistful of breadcrumbs, diced onion, and a thick stripe of ketchup across the top before it went into the oven at 350 degrees for an hour. The meatloaf was dense, brown on the outside, pink in the center if you were unlucky, and it landed on the plate in thick slices beside a mound of mashed potatoes and a spoonful of canned corn or green beans. It was not exciting food. It was predictable, filling, affordable food that solved the nightly problem of feeding a family on a budget that did not bend. And whatever was left over became cold meatloaf sandwiches the next day, served between 2 slices of white bread with yellow mustard. The same meal fed the family twice, which was exactly the point. Number 47. 1 pair of sneakers until they disintegrated. Your school shoes and your play shoes were 2 different things, and your play shoes were almost always a pair of canvas sneakers from the discount rack at the department store or the back wall of the 5 and dime. They were white on the day you bought them, which lasted roughly 72 hours. After that, they turned gray, then brown, then whatever color the dirt happened to be in your particular neighborhood. The rubber sole began pulling away from the canvas upper by October. The laces snapped and got replaced with whatever could be threaded through the eyelets, including, on at least one occasion, a piece of clothesline. By the time spring arrived, your big toe was visible through a hole in the front, and you kept wearing them anyway because the replacement pair was not coming until the back-to-school budget kicked in again. Number 46. Rubber galoshes pulled over your school shoes. Working-class parents did not buy separate rain boots and snow boots and mud boots. They bought 1 pair of rubber galoshes that slipped over your regular shoes, and those galoshes covered every weather condition from October to April. They were black, they were ugly, and they buckled up the front with metal clasps that pinched you every single morning. Your feet sweated inside them on mild days. They leaked on the worst ones, but they kept your 1 pair of school shoes dry, and in a house where replacing shoes before summer was not in the plan, That was the only thing that mattered. Number 45. Mom's sewing basket that fixed everything. It was a wicker basket or a round tin that once held butter cookies, and it sat in the closet or beside the couch where your mother watched the evening news. Inside were spools of thread in 6 colors, a pincushion shaped like a tomato, a pair of scissors with one loose screw, a measuring tape rolled into a tight spiral, and a card of needles stuck through a fold of felt. That basket kept every garment in the house alive past its natural lifespan. A ripped seam got stitched the same night it happened. A missing button got replaced with whatever was closest in size from the button jar, which was a baby food jar full of buttons salvaged from shirts that had finally given up. Hems were let down when kids grew taller. Cuffs were taken in when pants came from an older cousin who was built wider. Elbows were patched when the fabric wore through, and the patches did not match because matching fabric cost money that was better spent on groceries. Your mother could fix a torn pocket in 10 minutes without looking up from the television because she had done it so many times her hands did not need her eyes. She did not own a sewing machine. A machine was an investment, and the needle and thread method worked fine for everything short of making a garment from scratch. Working-class mothers in the 1970s did not take clothes to a tailor. They were the tailor. And the sewing basket was opened more often than the medicine cabinet because in a house where every shirt and every pair of pants had to last until it truly could not be saved, thread and a needle were as essential as the stove. Number 44. Dad's metal lunch pail. It was black or plaid patterned, dented on one corner from being dropped on a concrete floor, and it sat on the kitchen counter by the back door every morning at 4:45, packed and ready to go. Inside, 2 sandwiches on white bread wrapped in wax paper, an apple or a banana, maybe a handful of vanilla wafers in a folded plastic bag, and a thermos of black coffee with a cap that doubled as a cup. The lunch pail went to work and came home every single day, 5 or 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year. Your mother washed the thermos, wiped out the inside, and packed it again while the rest of the house was watching television. That nightly routine was as steady as a clock, and it never changed unless the family ran out of bread, at which point the sandwiches were replaced with whatever could be wrapped and carried. Number 43. The cookie jar that never held cookies. Every working-class kitchen had something on the counter shaped like a rooster or a mushroom or a smiling bear, and it was called the cookie jar. It did not contain cookies. It contained rubber bands, twist ties, a few pennies, a spare key, maybe a birthday candle from 2 years ago. Actual cookies were baked before holidays and eaten within a day. The jar stayed because throwing away a perfectly good ceramic container felt wasteful, and it turned out to be the most useful drawer in the kitchen that was not a drawer. Number 42. Sitting in the car while your parents ran into the store. Your mother left the engine running or the windows cracked, told you to stay put and not touch anything, and walked into the grocery store or the hardware store or the post office. You sat in the back seat, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 40. There was nothing to do. No screen, no game, no toy you had remembered to bring. You watched people walk through the parking lot. You counted the colors of the cars in the next row. You picked at the vinyl seat until a seam started to split. If you had a sibling, you fought with them until someone started crying and your mother appeared at the driver's side window looking like she had aged a year in 20 minutes. Nobody called it neglect. Nobody called it anything. It was called running errands, and the kids stayed in the car because bringing them inside meant they would ask for things, and the answer was always no. Number 41. Mom worked too. Not every working-class mother in the 1970s stayed home all day. By the middle of the decade, a lot of them had part-time or full-time jobs of their own because one income was no longer enough to keep the bills current. Waitressing at the diner on Route 9, working the register at the Woolworths downtown, cleaning houses in the wealthier neighborhoods across town, the ones with the driveways that curved and the lawns that were always green and even. She worked mornings or afternoons so that one parent was always home when the kids stepped off the school bus. Or she worked the night shift at the hospital laundry and slept during the day while you were in class. The money she brought in went directly into the household. The gas bill, the grocery budget, shoes for the kids before school. Nothing she earned was set aside for herself. And when she came home, there was still dinner to make, laundry to fold, and a kitchen to clean, because her second shift started the moment she walked through the door. Number 40. Cereal box prizes. The best part of a box of cereal in the 1970s was never the cereal. It was whatever small treasure was buried at the bottom of the bag, underneath a pound of flakes you had to dig through to find it. A plastic decoder ring, a miniature car, a sheet of iron-on transfers, a balsa wood glider that broke on the second throw. You shoved your hand into the box before breakfast and fished around until your fingers closed on the plastic wrapper. In a working-class house where toys were not purchased on impulse, that cereal box prize was an actual event worth getting up early for. You played with it for days. You brought it to school in your pocket. You traded it with the kid next door for whatever he had pulled out of his box that week. It was free, it was unexpected, and that combination made it feel more valuable than something bought in a store. Number 39. Using the oven for heat on cold nights. When the furnace could not keep up with a January cold snap, or when the gas bill was already too high and your parents had turned the thermostat down to 58 to save money. Your mother opened the oven door, turned the dial to 350, and let the heat pour into the kitchen. It was not safe by any standard written down anywhere. It was not efficient, but it warmed the one room where the whole family spent their evenings, and it worked well enough to get through the night. The kitchen smelled like warm metal and the ghost of whatever had been baked in there last. Nobody discussed it as a hazard. Nobody weighed the risks. You were cold. The oven was right there, and turning it on was free once the gas was already flowing through the line. Number 38. The water bill was watched like a bank statement. In a working-class house, every utility had a budget, and water was no exception. Short showers, no running the faucet while brushing your teeth, no filling the wading pool more than halfway. Your father read the meter himself and compared it to the bill. Sprinklers were for the people 2 streets over. A dripping faucet was fixed immediately, not because it was annoying, but because every drip was a fraction of a cent, and fractions of a cent added up when you were counting every one of them. Number 37. Newspaper spread on the floor under the high chair. Before the baby or the toddler sat down to eat, your mother opened the morning paper flat on the kitchen floor directly underneath the chair. Every meal involving a small child turned the area beneath the tray into a disaster zone within minutes. Mashed peas, strained carrots, applesauce, soggy cereal, spilled milk, all of it ended up on the floor before the meal was half over. The newspaper caught everything. When the child was finished and wiped down, your mother rolled the newspaper up, food and all, and dropped the bundle straight into the trash. No mopping, no scrubbing on hands and knees, just a clean sheet of newsprint laid down the next time. It was not a parenting tip from a magazine or a pediatrician. It was common sense in a house where time was already stretched too thin for an extra cleaning job 3 times a day. Number 36. Waking up to the sound of Dad's truck starting in the driveway. Before your alarm went off, before the sun cleared the roofline of the house across the street, the sound of a cold engine cranking over in the driveway told you the day had started whether you were ready for it or not. The truck coughed, idled rough for a minute or two while the engine warmed up, and then the headlights swept across your bedroom ceiling in a slow arc as he backed out and straightened. Some mornings you heard the radio come on through his open window, just a few seconds of a country station or the farm report before the truck reached the end of the block and the sound disappeared. He was gone by the time your feet touched the floor, and the only evidence he had been in the house at all was an empty coffee mug on the counter, a chair pushed back from the table, and 2 faint tire tracks in the frost on the driveway that would melt by the time the school bus came. Number 35. Dad's one good suit. It hung in the back of the closet in a dry cleaning bag that had been on it since the last wedding. It was navy blue or charcoal gray, slightly out of style, and it came out for funerals, weddings, christenings, and the one time a year your parents went somewhere that required a jacket. Your father did not own a second suit. He did not own a sport coat. He had work clothes, and he had the suit, and the distance between those two categories was the entire width of his wardrobe. When he wore it, he looked different, like someone from a photograph rather than someone from the kitchen table. Number 34. Walking to school in every kind of weather. The school bus had a fixed route, and if your house was not on it, you walked. Rain, snow, sleet, wind, 90-degree heat, it did not matter. Your mother handed you a coat if the temperature required one, or she did not, and either way you went. There was no parent driving you in the family car every morning unless the roads were impassable, and the bar for impassable in a working-class neighborhood was higher than most people would believe. 2 inches of snow was not a reason to stay home. That was a normal Tuesday. You walked with the other kids from the block, cutting through backyards, hopping chain-link fences, and crossing the Kroger parking lot to shave 2 minutes off the route, and you arrived at school damp, cold, overheated, or mud-spattered depending on what the sky was doing that particular morning. Number 33. The same 7 dinners every single week all year long. Monday was meatloaf. Tuesday was pork chops. Wednesday was spaghetti with sauce from a jar. Thursday was baked chicken. Friday was fish sticks lined up on a cookie sheet. Saturday, whatever was left from the week before, reheated and served without ceremony. Sunday was a roast if the budget allowed it, bean soup if it did not. The rotation shifted slightly by season. Chicken stew in January replacing the baked chicken of September, but the structure never changed. Your mother did not cook this way because she lacked imagination. She cooked this way because she knew exactly what each meal cost to the penny, exactly how much of each ingredient to buy at the store, and exactly how far each dish would stretch across a table of 4 or 5 or 6. There was no recipe book involved. She carried the whole system in her head. Predictability was not boring. It was a budgeting tool disguised as a weekly menu, and it kept the family fed without a single unplanned trip to the grocery store. Number 32. Furniture from relatives. The living room couch came from your grandmother's house when she downsized. The kitchen table and chairs belonged to your uncle before he and his wife bought a dinette set on sale. The dresser in your parents' bedroom had been in the family since your mother was a girl, and one of the drawers stuck unless you pulled it at an exact angle while lifting the front edge with your candle hand. Working-class families in the 1970s did not walk into a furniture store and buy a matched living room set. They inherited pieces, traded for them, or hauled them home from a neighbor who was getting rid of them. Nothing in the house matched. The lamps were different heights and different shades. The end tables had been stained different colors by different people in different decades. But every piece was functional, and in a house where function mattered far more than appearance, that was the only qualification that counted. Number 31. Duct tape held everything together. The side mirror on the car, the cracked handle on the screen door, the split in the garden hose that sprayed sideways every time the faucet was on, the tear in the vinyl seat cushion of the kitchen chair, the sole of a work boot that was pulling away from the upper. Duct tape was the universal repair material in a working-class home, and a roll of it lived in the junk drawer or on the shelf in the garage at all times, within arm's reach. Nothing was thrown out, replaced, or taken to a professional until duct tape had been attempted first. If the tape held, the problem was solved and nobody mentioned it again. If it did not hold, you peeled off the old strip and applied a wider piece. Duct tape was not a temporary fix. It was the final answer to most household breakdowns. Number 30. The rag box under the kitchen sink. Paper towels were a luxury. In a working-class house, there was a cardboard box under the kitchen sink filled with cut-up old t-shirts, worn-out washcloths, and towels too stained to use in the bathroom. That box handled every spill, every grease splatter, every muddy shoe, and every window that needed wiping. The rags were washed and reused until they fell apart. Your mother reached under that sink a dozen times a day, and the box never ran empty because the house produced worn-out fabric faster than it could use it up. Number 29. Watered down everything. The juice was half water. The shampoo bottle got refilled with water when it ran low. The dish soap was thinned out until the suds barely formed. Milk went further with a little water stirred in at the bottom of the jug. Your mother did not announce this. She just did it, and the household adjusted without realizing. By the time you were a teenager, full-strength orange juice tasted overwhelmingly sweet because you had never actually tasted it undiluted. Watering things down was not a trick, it was a system, and it stretched every bottle and every carton a few days longer than the manufacturer intended. Number 28. Soup from scratch, using every bone in the kitchen. Your mother saved bones the way other people saved receipts. Chicken bones from Sunday dinner went into a bag in the freezer. A ham bone from Easter or Christmas went in there too. Beef marrow bones from the butcher, who sold them cheap because most customers walked right past them, were the foundation of her best soups. When the bag was full, she dumped everything into the biggest pot in the house, added water, salt, a quartered onion, a few stalks of celery, and whatever vegetables were about to go soft in the crisper drawer. The pot simmered on the back burner for hours, filling the house with a smell that announced dinner from every room. By evening, the pot held a thick, rich broth loaded with whatever she had added. Noodles, rice, potatoes, beans. That single pot fed the family for 2 days, sometimes 3. Nothing that could still produce a meal was thrown out in a working-class kitchen, and a pile of bare bones was not garbage. It was the start of something. Number 27. Hand-me-down toys from older cousins. The box arrived around Christmas or a birthday, packed with toys your cousin had outgrown. A truck with one wheel missing, a board game with half the cards, a doll whose hair had been cut short on one side. None of it was new, and none of it mattered, because new was not the standard in a working-class house. Functional was the standard. If the truck still rolled, you played with it. If the game was missing pieces, you made up new rules. The box from your cousin was not charity. It was a delivery system, and it kept the toy shelf stocked without a single trip to the store. Number 26. Mom's purse was a survival kit disguised as a handbag. It was large, overstuffed, and it weighed more than a small child. Inside was everything the family could conceivably need during any trip outside the house. Tissues, aspirin, a miniature sewing kit, a strip of Band-Aids, a ballpoint pen, a small spiral notepad, a stack of coupons held together with a paperclip, a comb, a compact mirror, loose change in every denomination, 2 or 3 pieces of hard candy, and at least 1 crumpled grocery receipt from the previous week. If something went wrong in public, the solution was already in that purse. A kid fell and scraped a knee. She had a bandage and an antiseptic wipe. A button popped off a church shirt. She had a needle and white thread. Someone got hungry between meals. She had a granola bar or a sleeve of saltine crackers wrapped in a napkin. That purse went everywhere she went, slung over one shoulder, and she never once complained about the weight. Number 25. Cutting fabric softener sheets in half. The box of sheets sat on the shelf above the washing machine, and your mother tore every sheet in half before tossing it in the dryer. One box lasted twice as long. The clothes still came out soft enough, and the savings were invisible to everyone except the person tracking every household expense on a yellow legal pad at the end of the month. It was a small act, a tiny economy, but it was one of 100 small decisions happening every day in a working-class house, all aimed at the same goal: making what you had last longer than it was supposed to. Number 24. A single box fan for the entire upstairs. The bedrooms on the second floor had no air conditioning, no ceiling fans, and no natural cross breeze unless you opened every window in the hallway and hoped for the best. So your father wedged a 20-inch box fan into the hallway window at the top of the stairs, facing outward to pull the hot air out of the bedrooms, and that was the cooling system for the entire upper floor. It ran all night, every night, from June through September. The steady hum became the sound you fell asleep to, and silence meant the fan had died, which meant nobody was sleeping until it was replaced. On the worst nights in July and August, the fan accomplished nothing except rearranging hot air, and you lay on top of the sheets in your underwear staring at the ceiling, listening to your brother breathe in the bed across the room, waiting for October. Number 23. Your first real paycheck at 14 or 15. Working-class kids did not wait until college to learn what a paycheck looked like. You bagged groceries at the A&P, pumped gas at the Sunoco on the highway, or washed dishes at the diner where your mother's friend was the manager. You earned minimum wage, and you handed over part of what you earned. Not all of it, but enough to cover your own school supplies, your own sneakers, or the gas money your father fronted you to get to the job in the first place. Nobody sat you down and explained the value of work. You figured it out by watching your parents do it every day. You were not asked if you wanted to work. The question was where, and how soon could you start? By the time your classmates from the other side of town were opening their first checking account in college, you had already been cashing paychecks for 4 years and knew exactly what a deduction looked like. Number 22. Church on Sunday, no matter what. It did not matter if you were tired, if you had a headache, if you had stayed up too late the night before, or if you wanted more than anything on earth to sit in front of the television in your pajamas. Sunday morning meant getting dressed, combing your hair, climbing into the car, and sitting in a pew for an hour. Working-class families attended church for the same reason they showed up to work, because it was what people did, and skipping it would mean someone noticed and asked why. The church was the second center of community life after the neighborhood itself. Potluck suppers in the basement, vacation Bible school in the summer, the preacher who knew every family by name and asked about your grades in the hallway after the service. Missing a Sunday was not an option unless you were genuinely ill, and your mother's threshold for what qualified as genuinely ill was considerably higher than yours. Number 21. School supplies from the discount bin. Back-to-school shopping did not take place at a well-stocked office supply store. It happened at the sale table near the front door of the Five and Dime, or the clearance end cap at the drugstore, where everything was marked down and half of it was left over from last year's inventory. Pencils came in bulk packs of 12 for $0.25. Notebooks had thin cardboard covers that started peeling by the second week of October. The erasers crumbled into pink dust instead of actually erasing anything. The box of crayons had 16 colors, not 64, because the big box cost a full $1 more than the small one, and in a working-class household, $1 was $1 and 16 colors were enough. You carried your supplies to school in a paper bag, not a new backpack, and by November, half your pencils were broken and you were borrowing from the kid in the next seat. Number 20. Plastic covers on the good furniture. If the living room had a decent couch, one that had been bought on sale or inherited from someone with better taste and a bigger house, it was sealed in clear plastic. The vinyl covering stuck to the backs of your bare legs in the summer and made a sound like peeling surgical tape every time you shifted or stood up. Nobody sat on the good couch during an ordinary evening. That was reserved for company, holidays, and the annual visit from your mother's sister. The rest of the year, the family sat in the den on the old sofa with a blanket draped over the cushions to hide the stains in the spot where the cat had shredded the armrest. The good furniture was for display. The everyday furniture was for living. And the plastic stayed on until the couch underneath it was so far past its useful life that the protection no longer mattered. Number 19. The library card was your ticket to everything. In a working-class household, the public library was the only source of entertainment and information that cost absolutely nothing. You walked there after school or pedaled your bike there on Saturday morning, and you came home with a stack of books under your arm that would have cost a week's pay if you had bought them at a store. Adventure novels, mysteries, picture, books if you were young enough, encyclopedias if you had a report due. Your mother used the library too. Recipe books, romance novels, magazines she would never spend money on at the newsstand. The library card itself was a small rectangular piece of cardboard with your name typed on it and a number stamped in ink. It opened a door that had nothing to do with how much money your family made. For a working-class kid, the library was the first place in your life where what you had access to was not determined by your father's paycheck. Number 18. The junk car in the backyard that never moved. It sat behind the garage or along the fence line, up on blocks or sinking slowly into the grass. It had not run in years. The registration was expired. The tires were flat, and the back seat smelled like mildew and old upholstery. But your father would not get rid of it, because it still had parts: a starter motor for the car he actually drove, a side mirror, a set of lug nuts that were the right size, a radiator hose that could be cut down to fit. The junk car was not a car anymore. It was an inventory system, a parts warehouse sitting in the yard, and it stayed there because replacing a water pump from a dealer cost real money, but pulling one from the Impala out back cost an afternoon and a set of wrenches. The neighbors had one too. Everybody on the block knew which family had which make and model sitting in their yard, and if your father needed a part for a Ford, he walked 3 doors down to the guy with the Fairlane behind his shed. Sometimes the exchange involved a 6-pack of beer. Sometimes it was a promise to return the favor when the other guy needed something. The whole system ran on trust and shared necessity, and it kept half the cars on the street operational without a single visit to a professional mechanic. That dead car in the backyard was as much a part of working-class infrastructure as the toolbox in the basement and the hardware store on the corner. It did not look like much. The city might have called it an eyesore, but it kept the car in the driveway running, and in a house where the car was the only way to get to work, that was worth more than a clean lawn. Number 17. Christmas morning. In a working-class house, Christmas was not about abundance. It was about what your parents could pull together after months of careful, quiet planning that you were never supposed to see. The gifts under the tree were fewer than what showed up on the television specials, but each one had been selected deliberately, saved for in small amounts from every paycheck since September, and in many cases purchased through the layaway counter at Sears or the department store downtown. There were maybe 4 or 5 wrapped packages per child. One big gift and a handful of smaller ones. The big gift was the one you had been talking about since the fall: a bicycle, a pair of roller skates, a tabletop hockey game, a transistor radio, a football. It was never the top-of-the-line version. It was the version your parents could afford after 2 months of installment payments, and it was enough to make you yell when you tore the paper off. The stockings hung on the mantel or from nails along the wall, stuffed tight with an orange in the toe, a candy cane, a pack of juicy fruit, a yo-yo from the dime store, and maybe a pair of warm socks if your mother was feeling practical, which she usually was. She was up before anyone else on Christmas morning, starting the coffee, plugging in the tree lights, sliding a pan of cinnamon rolls into the oven from a tube of dough she had bought on sale. Your father sat in his chair with his mug and watched the kids open everything, one package at a time, because opening them slowly was a strategy for making the whole morning feel bigger than it was. Nobody rushed. Nobody ripped through every box in 5 minutes and asked what else there was. The morning stretched because stretching it was part of the gift. And it worked. Christmas in a working-class house was not less than anyone else's Christmas. It was built differently. It was quieter, slower, and constructed on top of months of small sacrifices you did not see. The overtime shifts your father volunteered for in November. The new coat your mother did not buy for herself in October. The layaway payments made an exact change at the counter every Friday. You did not learn about any of that until you were old enough to understand what it cost, and by then Christmas morning had already given you everything it needed to. Number 16. drinking out of jelly jars and gas station glasses. The drinking glasses in a working-class kitchen were not purchased as a matching set from a department store. They were whatever had accumulated in the cabinet over the years through normal household life. Welch's grape jelly came in a glass tumbler with Flintstones or Tom and Jerry or Archie characters printed on the side, and once the jelly was finished, the jar became a drinking glass for the next several years. A local gas station ran a promotion where you got a free glass with a fill-up, and your father brought home a new one every week until the cabinet held a full set of green-tinted tumblers with the station logo on them. Between the jelly jars, the gas station glasses, and the 2 surviving pieces of a crystal set someone gave your parents at their wedding, the kitchen shelf was a mismatched archaeology of where the family had shopped and who had given them gifts. Nobody found it unusual. A glass was a glass. Number 15. The furnace in the basement. Working-class houses in the 1970s were heated by oil, natural gas, or in some older homes, coal. And the furnace responsible for all of it sat in the unfinished basement like a cast-iron monument to a previous era of engineering. It groaned when it kicked on. It sent clanks and pings through the sheet metal ductwork that woke you up at 3 in the morning until you learned to sleep through it. It made the floor directly above it warm in a circle about 6 feet wide, and the warmth decreased steadily the farther you walked from the nearest vent. Some houses had cast iron radiators along the walls instead, heavy ribbed units that hissed steam and popped without warning and left a blister on your arm if you brushed against one in the hallway. The thermostat was controlled exclusively by your father, and the household policy on cold was simple and non-negotiable. Put on a sweater. Number 14. Hanging out at the gas station. The neighborhood gas station in the 1970s was more than a place to fill up the tank and check the oil. It was a gathering point, especially on weekends when the service bay was open and someone was always working on a car with the hood up. Men from the block stood around the open bay on Saturday mornings, drinking coffee from paper cups, watching the mechanic work, offering their own theories about what was making the engine knock. Kids sat on the curb out front with a cold bottle of pop bought from the vending machine for a dime, watching the traffic go by and the adults talk about things that meant nothing to you yet. The station had an air hose, a payphone on the outside wall, a gravel lot where people parked when there was no reason to park, and absolutely nothing happening, which was the whole point. It was the place you went when there was nothing to do, and in a working-class neighborhood on a Saturday morning, that was almost everyone. Number 13. Fathers who never called in sick. Your father went to work when he was healthy, when he was running a fever, when his back seized up and he walked to the truck bent at the waist, when the car would barely start in the cold, and when the roads were bad enough to close every school in the county. He went because missing a shift meant losing a day of pay. And a lost day of pay was the difference between the electric bill being paid on time and the electric bill being paid late with a penalty. Working-class men in the 1970s did not take personal days. They did not stay home to rest and recover. They swallowed 2 aspirin, filled their thermos, drove to the plant, punched the time clock at 6:59, and did it again the next morning. Calling in sick was for the kind of emergency that involved a hospital, and anything short of that was not a good enough reason to leave money on the table. Number 12. Putting cardboard in your shoes when the sole wore through. When the bottom of your shoe developed a hole and the replacement pair was still weeks or months away in the budget, a piece of cardboard cut to the shape of the sole and slipped inside the shoe kept your sock off the pavement. Your mother traced the outline of the shoe onto the side of a cereal box, cut it out with kitchen scissors, and slid the insert into place. It lasted about 2 days of walking before it wore through or got soaked in a puddle, at which point she traced another one and handed it to you without comment. It was a temporary repair that became a permanent arrangement, week after week, because the real fix cost money the family did not have available. You walked to school on cardboard and you learned very quickly to avoid every puddle on the route. Number 11. Getting your shoes resoled at the repair shop. The shoe repair shop sat between the barber shop and the hardware store on the main street of every working-class town. The man behind the counter could replace a heel, restitch a sole, and glue a flapping toe cap back together for a fraction of what a new pair cost. Your mother brought the whole family's shoes in a paper bag and picked them up the following week. Dress shoes, work boots, school Oxfords, all of them came back with new rubber and fresh stitching and another year of life in them. The idea of throwing away a shoe because the sole was worn was foreign. You wore it, you fixed it, you wore it again. Number 10. Mom cut everybody's hair in the kitchen. A trip to the barber or the salon cost money, and in a family with 2 or 3 kids who all needed haircuts every couple of months, the expense added up to something the budget could not support. So your mother did it at home. She draped a bath towel around your shoulders, sat you on a kitchen chair pulled into the middle of the floor, and went to work with a pair of sewing scissors and a plastic comb. The result was functional at best and uneven at worst. The bangs were never straight. The line across the back had a slight curve that you could feel with your fingers but could not see. She turned your head left, then right, squinted, and made one more cut that somehow made it worse. But it was free, and it was done. And if the other kids at school noticed, you told them your mom cut it, and they shrugged, because their mom did too. Number 9. The kitchen table that wobbled on every meal. One leg was shorter than the others, or the floor was uneven, or the table had been moved so many times that the joints were loose. Your father folded a piece of cardboard and jammed it under the short leg, and that fix lasted until somebody bumped the table hard enough to knock it loose again. The surface was scratched, the edges were chipped, and somebody's initials were carved into the underside. That table was where the bills got paid, the homework got done, the groceries got sorted, and every family decision got made. It was the center of the house, and it wobbled through all of it. Number 8. Empty coffee cans and mason jars held everything. Nails, screws, buttons, coins, bacon grease, crayons, rubber bands, safety pins, and loose change. The Folgers can in the garage held washers sorted by size. The Maxwell House can on the workbench held drill bits. The mason jar on the kitchen counter held whatever your mother needed to grab without opening a drawer. A peanut butter jar in the junk drawer held fuses and spare keys. Nothing in a working-class house was single-use. A can that once held coffee became permanent storage the day it was emptied, and it sat on that shelf for so long the label wore off and nobody remembered what brand it was. The whole system ran without labels, without organization, without anything that resembled a plan. Your father just knew which can held which size bolt, and your mother knew which jar had the buttons versus the birthday candles. You did not buy organizers. You did not buy containers. You used what the groceries came in, and it worked better than anything from a catalog. Number 7. Oatmeal for breakfast, every single morning. Not the flavored instant kind that came in little paper packets with a picture of a Quaker on the front, the kind that came in a round cardboard canister and needed 15 minutes of stirring on the stove over a medium flame. Your mother made a full pot of it every morning before anyone was dressed, thick and gray and bubbling slowly in the saucepan, and she served it in heavy bowls with a spoon of sugar on top, or a drizzle of milk if there was any in the refrigerator. It was hot, it stuck to your ribs, and a single canister lasted the family most of the month. Some mornings there was a piece of toast beside it. Some mornings the oatmeal was the entire meal and you were grateful for it, because breakfast in a working-class house was fuel to get you to lunch, not a menu to be debated over. Number 6. You knew the value of $1 before you turned 10 years old. Not because anyone sat you down and delivered a speech about money management, because you watched. You saw your mother at the kitchen table on Friday night with a stack of bills, a checkbook, and a pencil, dividing your father's paycheck into envelopes labeled rent, electric, gas, grocery, and a smaller one labeled savings that usually stayed empty. You watched her count the bills twice, do the math on the back of an envelope, and sit quietly for a moment when the numbers did not work, You saw your father hesitate at the gas station counter before buying a pack of cigarettes because the price had gone up by a quarter. You understood, without being told, that money was not something your family possessed. It was something they managed with care, down to the last coin, with nothing left over at the end of the month. That understanding never left you. Number 5. The smell of the factory on your father's clothes. It came through the door before he did. Grease, solvents, metal shavings, machine oil, rubber, or whatever compound the plant processed that week. It settled into the fabric of his work shirt and the denim of his pants, and no amount of Tide or borax fully removed it. His work clothes hung on a hook in the mudroom or the basement, separate from everything else, because your mother did not want the smell transferring to the school clothes or the church clothes or the dish towels. She ran a separate load just for his shirts and pants, hot water, extra soap, and still the smell held. That smell meant the shift was over. It meant he was home. It meant the paycheck was one day closer. And for every kid in a working-class house, that smell became so familiar it stopped registering as a smell at all. It was just the scent of a father who worked with his hands, and it was in the walls, in the couch cushions, in the car upholstery, in everything. Number 4. Sharing winter coats between siblings. If the oldest kid outgrew a winter coat and the next child in line was close enough in size, the coat moved down without discussion. The zipper got replaced if it broke. Missing buttons were sewn back on with whatever thread was in the sewing box. The torn lining was patched from the inside where nobody could see it. A coat that was bought new for the first child in 1971 might still be in regular service by 1976, worn by a third kid who had never in their life owned a jacket that arrived in a store bag with the tags still on it. Working-class families could not afford a new winter coat for every child every year, so the coats traveled, season to season, kid to kid, patch by patch, until the fabric was too thin to hold the warmth anymore and the coat finally went into the rag pile under the basement stairs. Number 3. Your parents never complained. Not to you, not in front of you, not in any way you could detect while you were young enough to believe that the way your family lived was the way everyone lived. Whatever stress they carried, whatever bills were past due, whatever conversation they had about money at 2 in the morning in the kitchen when they thought every kid in the house was asleep, none of it reached the breakfast table. Your father went to work. Your mother kept the house running. The meals showed up, the clothes were clean, the lights stayed on, and the fact that maintaining all of that required a level of daily effort, sacrifice, and worry that you were not old enough to understand was something they simply never mentioned. They did not ask for sympathy. They did not explain how difficult it was. They did not compare your family's situation to anyone else's. They just did it, every single day, and you grew up believing it was easy because they were good enough at it to make it look that way. Number 2. You turned out all right. You wore patched jeans and drank powdered milk and shared a bedroom with 2 siblings. You walked to school in the rain and ate cold bologna sandwiches at noon and watched 3 channels on a television with rabbit ears wrapped in foil. You ate leftovers on Thursday, skipped the ice cream truck on lean weeks, and your biggest Christmas was 5 presents and a stocking with an orange in the toe. And you came out the other side of all of it knowing how to fix a leaky faucet, cook a full meal from almost nothing, stretch $1 until it begged for mercy, and show up to work every single day whether you felt like it or not. The working-class childhood of the 1970s did not hand you advantages, it handed you skills. And those skills built the kind of adult who does not quit when things get hard, does not waste what they have, and never, not for one day, forgets where the whole thing started. Number 1. You did not know you were working class. That is the thing about growing up in it. You had no name for it while it was happening. You did not compare your house to the houses on the other side of town because you never went to the other side of town. You just lived. You wore what you had. You ate what was served. You played with whatever was around, and you did not feel deprived. because every kid on your block was living the same way. The houses were all the same size. The cars were all the same age. The fathers left for work at the same hour, and the mothers stretched the same groceries across the same number of days. Nobody used the word poor, because poor was something else, something worse. Your family was just regular. And regular in the 1970s meant your father left before sunrise 6 mornings a week. Your mother made every paycheck last until the next one arrived. And somehow, every month, the rent was paid, the lights stayed on, and dinner was on the table at 6. You just called it home. 100 signs, and not a single one of them felt unusual while it was happening. That is what makes them worth remembering now. The working-class life of the 1970s was not dramatic. It was not the kind of story anyone wrote down at the time. It was ordinary, built out of routines and sacrifices and small decisions made at kitchen tables after the kids went to bed, and that ordinary raised a generation of people who learned how to get by with less and make every bit of it count. If anything on this list sounded like your childhood, if you can still hear that screen door, or smell that metal lunch pail, or feel the cardboard shifting inside your shoe on a wet morning, share this video with someone who grew up the same way. Hit subscribe if you have not already, and leave a comment with the number on this list that took you back the farthest. Until next time.